There we go. So good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a good weekend. We're starting today where we left off last Wednesday with lighting and specifically using the light stage that's available in classic content. There is a light stage or light bowl, and there's also a scene. And both of those are found in the blotchy folders. Why they're called blotchy, I don't know. But again, that classic content I've given you and left for you on Google Drive. So if you want to give it a try, you can. The light stage is excellent for product shots. So it would be a good time, with your toy assignment to give it a try. The lighting is already set up for you. So right now I'm in camera view, but let me go ahead and switch back to perspective view so we can check that out. Okay. So this is what it looks like in VPR mode. You can see that it's just a big dish. And the reason that this works kind of nicely is that it's a seamless in 360 degrees. So you're not distracted by the edge where the floor meets the wall. Okay. And it focuses directly on your toy or your object or whatever. If you want to try this for your reboot character, I would encourage you to try that. Now, if I switch, maybe to wireframe so you can see and zoom out a little bit, again, we can see all the lights that have been prepared for us here. We have the top light, which by its shape is an area light. Area lights, if you recall from last week, are these rectangular shapes. And what they are comprised of is an array of linear lights. Linear lights are before linear lights, and linear lights are an array of point lights. So it's actually like having 16 point lights inside here to get a nice soft shadows and overall even lighting. It's less harsh than using a distant light. And then you'll notice here, if we look at this one, this is our key light. It too is an area light, okay? And then we have a second one here. If I come back here, if I can select it, let me go back and under key, let's go to key 2. There we go. In key 2, if I remember correctly, let's look at the properties. Key 2 is a spotlight, right? Okay. Now, because this is kind of a legacy feature to Lightwave, it was provided for us a long time ago, and because they've changed the lighting properties to lux instead of percentages over the years, we have to really crank it up a bit. Now, another thing that I added, so let me go back to, is an environment light. So if you want to create the illusion that this is a kind of a nice, bright, sunny day outdoors, if I go back to camera view, and I go from camera view, and I go to VPR, okay, this looks like an interior shot, okay? I have a nice soft shadow. I could probably crank up, the lighting in some respects a little bit more, so the background is no longer gray, but white. But what I want you to take note of is that if I look at the lights, and here's light properties, if I click in this upper right-hand corner, and I select the environment light, like so, you can see that if I want, I can adjust the settings of that. And I would do that by going under, hold on here, my render properties. Okay. Actually, I'm sorry, backdrop. So there we go. Let's go to backdrop. And you can see that I added under add environment, there's some default ones. If you want image world, again, these are like big bubbles that encase your environment. They're especially useful for reflections. Also, they can add subtlety to your lighting. You can add a physical sky. You can add, if you want to know Python, you can add features from here. I added Sky Tracer 2 just to show you what that is. And we will cover Sky Tracer 2 a little bit later. But if I turn that on, notice how, if we look at the bottom here, this is Sky Tracer 2. It looks kind of like a sunset or sunrise, as it were. And notice how it bathes the entire scene in this kind of soft blue light. Okay, so if that's the look that you're going for, it's not a bad approach. And again, for a lot of different types of scenes, even interior scenes, it works really nicely, especially if light is coming from a window and you want to bathe the room in this, nice exterior light, then that's the way that works. So, it really depends on the kind of look that you're going for. So that's the effects that we have for backdrop. Okay. Now we can check each one of those lights. And to do that, again, if you have light properties and you have to select lights, and you select light properties, and that pops back up. Okay. Right now, the current light is environment light, and notice that it's the intensity by default is set to 100%. Now, if we go back from the top down, key light 1, remember this is area light, and I crank this way up to 48 lux. By default, the settings for most lights are like 3.14 lux. And don't ask me what a lux is. I know that it's a unit of measurement in calibrating in intensity of light, but I don't know how it translates. And it is, I'm sure it has to do with physics and mathematics and that sort of thing. Okay. So another thing that I was trying to do the other day is that that we can add volumetrics. So I can select and I can affect volumetrics here. And we can by default add the volumetric intensity. But maybe let's turn volumetrics off for the area light. But I'm going to switch to key 2 light because this is a spotlight, and I do want it to affect volumetrics. So I'm going to start at 100% and see how this goes. Okay. Now you'll notice that we aren't getting the volumetrics. And the other day I was hoping that that would work, and I thought I had all the settings working here for me, but they're not. So what I need to do is I need to go to my render properties, like so, and render properties is up. And what I want to do is I want to use, it's under volumetrics, make sure that you enable volumetrics by clicking on this. And then also down here, use volumetric scattering. Now you'll notice that it just flooded the whole darn room with that volumetric effect. So let's switch from camera view to perspective view, and let's see what it looks like. Now that went nuts. So what we need to do to get a better idea of what this looks like is instead of, let's see, instead of 100%, let me go back to the light itself. Instead of volumetric intensity 100%, let's drop it all the way down to 10% and see what we get. Now, there must be other lights that are being affected as well. So we need to check those because that's really not helping us. So that was our key light. That's key 2. Yeah, I change that to 10%. Let's look at top light and see what we have here. I'm going to turn volumetrics off for that so that we can get back to some sort of normalcy here. Let's look at the fill light, and I don't want it to affect volumetrics. And that fill light made a huge difference. It was right there that made a big, big difference. So let me go back to the light that I had, key 2, and let's see, because I want it to be visible, and I don't know why it's not visible at the moment. So we have affect volumetrics, volumetric intensity. So let's go ahead and crank that back up to 100 just to see what we get here. And I got bupkis. I got nothing here. And I have no fall off, and it should be showing here with that. Here's our spot. Visible to camera. Let's turn that on. Let's try that. Effect diffuse. There you go. Effect OpenGL. We got that. So that, in effect, is affecting some of the volumetrics, but I actually want to see that stream of light there. So, and at the moment, I'm not having success. So that there's like a gazillion of these features that you need to tinker with in order to make this work. So I'm going to drop this back down to maybe 50% and see if we get a better feel for that. And let's check some of the other lights while I'm up here. So let's check environment light. I don't want volumetrics with that. I just want the spotlight to have volumetrics, and that's it. Let's go back to sky, sun, back to volumetrics. Let's turn that off. Okay, so I'm trying here, but I'm not getting the look that I'm going for. So maybe we can try that on another time because I'm trying all these. How about the backlight? Effect specular, let's turn that one off. So I've turned off volumetrics for all the other lights except for the spotlight. And I don't know why it's not showing up. So spot, let's look at volumetric samples, volumetric intensity, effect volumetrics, and try that. I don't want it because that was that one. So let's try again. Let's go back to the key light 2. Let's go back to that. Well, you could add a projection image, but that's not what I'm going for. Okay. So let's try soften the edge here. Now that part is working, so I'm softening the edge. I guess I could change, try to change, add the samples, see if that affects things. And it's not helping us a whole lot. So I'm gonna go back to the 2 samples. Okay, so I'm striking out with this. And that's okay. So I'm gonna go back here and I'm gonna go back to use volumetric scattering and turn some of these off. Now let's see, it says unseen by camera, use legacy volumetrics. We could try that. Again, there's, what have I clicked here? But a half a dozen, options here. Okay. Backdrop. No, none of them are working to create that little pin or that volume of light that I'm going for. Let's turn that off. Okay, so let me go back from perspective view to camera view and see what we have here. So, I've kind of, messed this up a little bit. I had something much nicer before. But one of the other things that I wanted to show you, so let me turn light intensity down a little bit. Let me change this to maybe 6 lux. And see if we go, or even go down to 3 lux. That's better. So, it was just way too intense. So maybe even 2 lux. So I've, increased the light properties around him. And I see an interesting or a nice shadow here. But one of the things that you can do with lights, and there are several things that you can do with lights, is that under shadows, you can certainly change the color of the shadows that are being cast by them. So if you wanted a bluish, kind of a morning shadow, we could do that. Cast shadows, let's try that. Let's click on here again. Come on. There we go. So if I tried kind of a light blue, let's see how that looks. Now notice that my shadows are in blue, not the default black. So that's one of the things that you can do. You can change the color of the shadows. More importantly, and this is especially helpful for fill lights, because you may recall that all lights cast shadows in some way. But if you wanted a fill light not to affect a particular object, remember, we can always turn that off. So if you select objects, I can click here and I can exclude the objects. So I have that spotlight, and that's excluding that. Now, if I turn on some of the others, let's look at key 1. And right here, if I exclude Mike, I don't get any shadows at all. So again, why would you want to do that? Because if I had a fill light and I didn't want to have a whole bunch of shadows confusing, being really confusing, then I would want to probably turn off shadows for some objects from those lights. Okay, so I don't want to do that. I don't want to exclude that. And let's go back to key 2, and I don't want to exclude that. So I get, nice soft shadows here. Actually, you know what? That doesn't look so hot. So maybe I do want to turn that one off. Let's go ahead and exclude that. So I get a nice soft shadow. So the next step, if I wanted to, again, let's crank this back up a little bit. Let's look at our key light here. That was 48. Wow, I really cranked that up. So let's go down to 3. No, I got to go up again. Let's go to 12 lux. And then, you just have to keep going incrementally, and maybe 24 lux. Okay. And then I'm going to go down again. That's the key light. Let's go to the top light. That's 10 lux. Okay. Let's go to the fill light. That's 9 lux. And again, I was just doing multiples. Got our backlight. That's 2 lux. It still looks underlit. So let's go to key 2. I'm going to crank that one up again to maybe 6 and see what we have. So I think I need, let's go to the sun. And let's go ahead and crank that back up again. Let's go up to maybe 3 lux. So, and let's go to the environment light. Let's see what we have here. That's already set to 100%. So I'm going to leave that as is. It's not the ideal lighting that I had when I opened this up. Well, maybe what I could do is I could revert. So let me go to, let's go to load. And I want to, let's see if I can't revert to this last save version. I'm going to go to that, and let's do that. Because I had a look that I was going for that was looking pretty decent. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't look much better, but that's textured solid. So let's look at VPR. And that looks pretty good. Okay. So now what I wanted to do is I wanted to cover the camera settings so that you have an idea of when you're working on a model, how to adjust those. So what we want to do is we want to switch at the bottom from lights to camera. There we go, and look at camera properties. And here's our camera properties. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off or close the light properties panel and leave the camera properties up. So let's take this one at a time. By default, you generally have a 24mm lens, and it's a perspective lens by default. But you'll also notice under that, there's a whole bunch of different ones. If you want an orthographic one, which is no perspective at all, you could use that. We have advanced camera settings. Another one that's used often is a real lens camera. So this would be 24mm if you want to simulate real camera settings. So maybe I wanted this to be, you know, a 35 millimeter lens or a 50 millimeter lens. Let's try 35 millimeter to see what I get here. So now I've really zoomed in on my character just by changing the lens settings. Okay. The next thing that you want to take into consideration is the resolution. Don't change the I don't know how to pronounce that, iridescence fall off. Leave that at 1, and don't change any of these other features. You can change the different types of cameras and the angle of the camera, but leave the rest of these settings alone. But under resolution, we have a whole bunch of options here. Now, for this old-timey one, they have picked 800 by 600. But typically, the one that's most commonly used is these days is 1024 by 768. Okay. So that would be a more, common screen size or resolution that's used. 1024 by 768. The next one that you should look at carefully is the multiplier. Now, what they did for this is they set it to 50% as opposed to 100%. You don't see that on the screen at the moment, but you see it at the time that you render it. Now, why would you want to do it at half size? Because as you're doing test rendering, you don't want to sit and spend hours and hours watching grass grow, watching the computer render your scene. So by setting it to 50%, what you will do is that you will decrease the render time by about, it'll be maybe 25% of the original, of the final render size if you want. And it'll take about 25% of the time that it would normally take. So let's try that one. And then if we like the look of it, then we can crank it up to 100%. Or if you're going for print and you want to really enlarge the size of your rendering, you can increase it to 200, 300, 400, or larger percent. But every time you do that, it's going to significantly add to the render time. So we'll start by doing the multiplier at 50%, okay? The next thing that you want to take a look at is that if you want to constrain the height and the width and the aspect ratio, you can. Again, I rarely, if ever, touch these settings, so leave these alone. What you do want to affect, though, especially for your final render, are the minimum and maximum samples. What this does is it affects the anti-aliasing. So if you want to remove, if you notice a number of jaggies that appear in the curved parts of your rendering and you want to eliminate those, you have to increase this. But again, since we're going to do a test rendering, I'm going to leave the minimum and maximum samples to 1 and 8 as is. So those are your camera properties right here. So I'll close that. The next thing that you need to look at are your render settings. So I'm going to bring that back over. And where that is found, again, is when you have the render tab selected, we can go to the render properties and we can start, and we're going to look at all of these different tabs here. So for us, we're only rendering a single frame. So the start frame is frame 1 and the end is frame 1. But if we were rendering an animation, you could have it start at any frame and end at any frame of your animation, okay? So that would be that is, but right now we're just doing a single. And you'll notice that it has the preview. You can make that smaller or larger. When you turn off preview, that will reduce your rendering time. I like looking at it, even though it does increase rendering time, because if I'm dissatisfied for any reason with how the rendering is turning out, I will kill it. But if you know for a fact that you've used a particular rendering settings before, and it's a slam dunk that it's going to work, and you want to speed up your rendering time, meaning you have less time, then you can turn off the preview altogether. Okay? And again, I generally don't use limited region or anything else. We can look at preview paths. The next one is the render, come on. There we go, render settings themselves. And this gets a bit overwhelming too. So it really depends on the kind of model and the kind of surfaces that you have. When you're done, do you want to ray trace shadows? Well, in our case, yeah, you bet. Do you want to ray trace reflection? Yep, we have reflections, so we want to affect that. Do you want to ray trace refraction? Now, I don't have refractions, but if I had glass in here, or plastic, or something that was transparent or as well as translucent, that light penetrated and light bent, and it bent the light, then yes, I would want to do that. Do I want to render lines? Not necessarily. I can turn that off, and that might speed things up. Render instances, yep. Do I want to enable mapping? I could try that. I don't have lens flares, but if I did, I would want to make sure that that was enabled. All of these features add to the render time if you turn them on. Now, these are all the default settings, and I'm going to leave them as is right now. So we have diffuse bounces, which is basically your local color here. At 2, we have your ray recursion limit for transparency recursion, and you can look at these reflection, refraction, ray precision, on and on and on. These are all the default settings. So which ones do you change? It really depends, and it requires kind of a lot of guesswork on your part if you're not getting the results that you are going for. The other thing that you probably want to do, I could enable spike. That will help. Now the next one, let's go to global illumination. And what we have here is, at the moment, is set to brute force. But in version 2020, there's another option available, irradiance cache. And we can work on this on another day when we cover more advanced lighting techniques. But this, especially for interiors, will give you a much more realistic appearance. But right now we're doing brute force. And if you want, you could also have enable secondary rendering effect. The next thing that you want to determine, and again, by default, it only has one ray of light. But again, to get better quality, you want to increase the number of rays in small increments, because that too will add a lot of render time to your model. But I'm just going to try it with one right now and see what we have. The next tab is volumetrics. So again, we can have indirect sampling if we wish. And sometimes that will add to the quality of it. You want indirect samples, by default 16, indirect intensity. These are all default. So I'm just leaving this alone for right now. If you wanted to add fog, you could do that. And there's other settings that you would do for that. There's also various buffers that you may want to add. We have the final render and the alpha. That's what I'm going to do for, just leave that on for right now. Okay. Now, one of the others that we could add, because I'm not using lens flares or anything else. Let's try output. Yeah, okay. I'm going to leave those settings alone. So I'm mostly going with default settings. And then the next step is to simply, once you have it ready to go, is to render frame. Don't render scene, render frame. That's all we need to do. So it's going pretty quickly because, again, remember we set it up for 50%. And there's our 50%. Notice that the preview render is much larger than the final render. But this gives us an idea of, what our final render is going to look like. And if I'm pleased with those results, and for our demonstration purposes, it looks pretty good, Then probably what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go back to camera settings. I'm going to go back to camera properties, and I'm going to change that from 50% to 100%. Okay. And I'm going to change also, since I like this, the minimum samples, I'm going to use 8, and the maximum samples, I'm going to use 16. Okay. So again, to increase the quality of, and every time I change one of those, I wouldn't change too many of those settings at once, because you're never going to know which one had desirous effect or the one that kind of messed up your rendering. So I'm going to go back again and look at render properties. Okay. And let's go back to, let's see, global illumination. I'm going to increase the number of rays to 8 and see what the quality that I get now. Okay. So he's looking pretty decent. Looks okay. But let's watch and see how much more time it takes to render this. And hopefully we aren't sitting here until the end of class in order to do that. So it is pre-process is going on pretty quickly, and the whole thing isn't too bad right now. Just to let you know, the more lights you have, the longer the time it will take to render your scene. That's another factor. And I can show you one of the projects that I'm working on for myself that has at the moment like 32 lights, because I'm trying to create the a virtual gallery. And so I'm trying to illuminate the interior all with, remember I talked about last week of IES lights that try to simulate true floodlights and particular types of spotlights to get a more realistic look. So now it's going through all of its motions, and it's not taking too long to render, but it will take it. So the last time we did that render, it was 7 seconds, and it says just a few seconds left remaining, and we are good. So there we go. In order to see this and to manipulate this now, you need to go ahead and abort the preview, and now we can come back to this one. And while this doesn't look that big, it is a pretty good size rendering. And look at how clean it looks. It's really, really very nice. We have our reflections, especially in the chrome. We have nice soft shadows. They might be a little bit, for my taste, a little bit too harsh. So I would probably maybe go back and turn off shadows for some of the lights so that it would illuminate the reboot character, but it wouldn't cast shadows. Okay. And, you know, play with those settings. But, you know, I have a nice, you know, top light. I have a couple of key lights, and I have lights that are used to, what am I saying here? That have fill lights and that sort of thing. And I'm in pretty good shape here. And then when you're all done with this, and I know that we've gone through some of this before, but just to let you know that now you're ready to save your rendering. That's the last step that you want. So we go to File. And my recommendation to you is that you save it as a Lightwave 32-bit Photoshop file, and that you also save it as a JPEG. So I'm going to save mine inside. Let's go to my desktop here. And I'm going to go inside my content for fall 2020, which is you guys. And I'm going to go inside images and save it in there. And we'll name it Reboot with Light Stage. Okay, and it will automatically add the extension. And then I can come back again, and I'll go to File, and I'm going to switch down here, and I'm going to go to Lightwave JPEG. There we go. And I'll call Reboot with Light Stage. I can name it the same one because it's going to have a different extension. One will have JPEG, the other will have Photoshop. Okay, so that's in my image folder, and I believe it's in the correct one. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So there you have it with the lighting, the camera settings, the render settings, and it really can get overwhelming if you're not, you know, if you panic, it can be a bit too much. What I do want to do though, is I want to show you an image that I've been working on here. So I'm going to move this up and come back over here, and let's bring this down. Come on. Oh, come on, where's my Photoshop? No, okay, come on. I don't know that you can see this. So let me go back again. There we go. Now let's bring it back in here. There we go. Okay. So this is the gallery that I've been working on. Now, in order to get the lighting to look somewhat realistic, again, I chose in all of these can lights here to use IES lights that I downloaded from the internet. And then I had, you know, obviously time and time again, it takes because there are so many lights to illuminate the room, because there are no windows. What I had to do is I had to do one render after another. As you can see for the images on the wall, I have some placeholders and I'm gradually replacing them with my own artwork. But overall, this is pretty close to what it would look like. It looks a little too perfect for my taste, but what a gallery would look like with no windows. Now, another thing that I had to add too, because it would just be too dark, would be ambient light. Now, if you're doing an exterior scene, you can use the environment light, but environment lights don't have an effect on an interior if there are no windows. If you have windows and it allows light, the windows allow light to penetrate through them, an environment light would be the light of choice right now. But what I had to do is I had to increase the ambient light just a little bit, or include an ambient light, because ambient light, as I believe I mentioned the other day, is that if you were to go into a room and you were to turn off all the lights, and you were to plug up all the little cracks and crevices of light coming through the doors and that sort of thing, there would still be light that somehow penetrates and exists in that room. And that is the ambient light. So if you do choose to use ambient light, I wouldn't go any higher than 5%, and that would be about it. And that would be a good starting place so that you at least get kind of a base layer of your lighting when you're lighting your piece, okay? So for your toy assignment and for your final assignment, it really depends, you know, lighting will make a huge difference. And it's gonna really depend on what, you know, whether you're doing an interior or exterior scene and that sort of thing, and create your piece. So I'll move this back up here. There we go. Okay. So, are there any questions from you guys about lighting at the moment? About the render settings, about the camera settings? Because I was going to switch gears now, and for the remaining like 10, 15 minutes, I can either stop now, or what I was thinking of doing is what I wanted to work on next, because we are going to cover lighting again and rendering settings, but a little bit more advanced settings later on this semester. I wanted to start organic modeling, and I have a little demonstration that I do every semester of how to build kind of a ceramic organic cup. And that's what I wanted to start for you today. And then what we're going to do is we're going to watch a series of videos, And I will have them recorded, but they will not be posted on YouTube because I don't want to infringe on copyrights. But they will be posted on Canvas, so you can watch them again and again. And it's something that you might want to consider doing for your final project, and that would be to create a character model and just maybe even just do the head. And that's what this guy builds. And it's really, he does a superb job. He does a much better job, and it's much more sophisticated and polished than I would. So that's what we're going to do. So what I want to do next, though, is if there aren't any questions. No questions? Okie doke. So what I want to do next is I want to go to Modeler, and we're going to, there's my reboot character, and I'm going to go back and look at this and 4 up, but I don't want a reboot character. I want to create a brand new file. And this is going to be my cup. Hit A, fit all. So, you know, you could use Boolean modeling for the cup, but I want to show you organic modeling so that in the end, this cup looks like it's made more of ceramic than of maybe something that's machined or what have you. Okay. So I'm going to get started with this today, and we'll see how far I can take it in the next 15 minutes or so. And I want to start with a disk. That's what I'm going to do from the top view. And I'm just going to click and drag like so. And this is going to be one big cup. Because if I look at my grid size here, and this is something that you also need to pay close attention to. You can see that the grid size is 1 meter. So I have a cup that's 1, 2, 3, 4 meters in diameter. That's way, way too big. So let's go ahead and let's make it, I'm going to make it, it's still going to be a huge cup, but just for the heck of it, I'm going to go ahead and center this so that that's 0. I'm going to make sure that the radius, I'm just going to make it 500 millimeters. And 500 millimeters. That's still one huge cup. But for, and that's something that you really need to pay attention to when you're building a model, is approximate size, so that when you do choose to light it, or later on if you choose to add different kinds of effects, like fiber effects, and you want to add hair or fur or things like that, it will approximate, you know, you need to approximate the size of your object. So I'll go ahead and I'll fix that. And now what I want to do to build the cup up, okay, is number one, I probably should bring this in a little bit. Okay, I'll zoom out just a little bit. There we go. I'm going to use extrude. Okay, so if I go ahead and I click on here and I drag it up, come on. Thought I selected it. There's extrude. There we go. So, you know, get the approximate proportions of my cup, like so. And because I'm going to use sub patches, I don't need to worry about the number of sides. I'm going to leave the default number of sides at 24, and then I'm good to go. Okay. So I'm done extruding it. But now, and this is a tool that you guys have already used, okay, in order to create the interior of this, can anybody tell me, you know, what tool I would use to build the interior? And we would use the bevel tool. So I'm going to select and make sure that I have polygons selected here. And I'm going to select the top polygon. And now what I can do is I can hit B for bevel. And this is where probably I want to zoom in just a little bit here. So how about if I look at the side view like so, and zoom in a little bit. So now what I want to do with B for bevel, okay, now I'm going to right click and drag And I want to begin to, just like we did with Reboot's mouth, the little speaker, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring this in a little bit more, like so. And now we're going to bring it out, and we're going to bring it down. And I might have to, you know, I might have to fiddle with this while you guys for another day. And now I can bring this all the way down like so. So each time I do that, I'm right clicking. And I want that to come straight down. So I'm gonna hold down the control key. And hopefully that looks about right. There we go. So let's take a look at this. Let's turn off bevel. Let's deselect the polygon. Let's look at this in, there you go. That's kind of a thick cup, huh? But that's okay for right now, okay? Maybe it'll be kind of a thick Demitasse cup. I would want the wall of that to be a little bit thinner. So I think between now and Wednesday, I will remake this. But, you know, you get the idea. And to smooth the whole thing out, if I hit the tab key, and I will get an error message because at the bottom I have an end on. Okay, and I click. Now, notice how that smooths everything out. And actually, that doesn't look half bad. But now what I want to do is I want to build the handle. So what I'm going to do is, and that's probably where we will end today. No, we have a little bit of time. We have 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to view this under texture wired so I can see all the wires here. If I want, I could, I don't know why I have, I'm going to select this edge right here and move it because I really didn't want that edge there. I mean, I guess I could use it. Why not? I'll go ahead and I'll use it. I'll use that edge, this wire right here, because I need a place to be able to affix the handle to this. So I'm going to add geometry to pull it out of the top and add it to the bottom. So actually, I probably should move it up a little bit. So what I can do is I can switch from polygon to edge. Let's do that. And I'm going to click here and select a couple of these so that I can select loop. Okay, so I can go up to select loop. There we go. Now I'm just going to hit T for move that up a little bit. So hold down Control, move that up just a little bit. So, not too much. Yeah, because that's going to have an effect on the rest of that. Okay. We'll leave it right there. That's pretty much where it was. So I'm going to turn off move. But now what I need to do is I need to make some cuts along here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cut here, and I'm going to make 2 cuts down here. So to do that, I'm going to use the knife tool. So that will probably be the easiest way to do that. So that's Shift K for the knife tool. And I'm going to come across here. Let's select across. I'm going to hold down the Control so that it cuts, because it's going to cut. Remember, the knife tool cuts all the way across. And that's too low. So I'm going to undo that. Let's move that up a little bit. That's still too low. I don't know why I'm seeing something very different. So let's fix that. And let me go ahead and make some other cuts up here. So this will be the top of my, oops, I didn't want to do that. Oh no. Come on. There we go. Okay, so let me go ahead and move this one up. So I'll go ahead and I'll select, with edge selected, I will select these. I don't want that one selected, so I'll deselect that, and I'll go ahead and I'll say select loop. And now I'll go ahead and I'll hit T move for move, and I'll move it up like so. There's something kind of wonky with my model here. So I'll leave it for right now, though. Actually, you know what? I don't like this at all. But well, I'll leave it for now just to show you what I'm doing. So I moved a little bit, but it's having too much of an effect on the top, and I don't want that. So if I make a little Demitasse cup, so it's going to be a little tiny handle here. And then the next thing that I would want to do is turn off move. Let's T for move. There we go. Now let's go ahead and make another cut. So I'm going to go ahead and with a knife tool, and let's move that down like so. And let's take these and move them up. Let me look at this from, instead of wireframe, I'm going to look at this from texture view. And texture wired from the side view. So again, let me try to move this up a little bit. Select loop. T for move. Oh, I know why. Let's try to move that up. Yeah, this isn't going the way that I had planned. So I'm going to undo, and I'm going to remake this for Wednesday. But what I need to do is, when I was making this, I want the wall to be a little bit thinner. And I need to make some cuts along here and 2 cuts along here. So why it's not working in here, I don't know. Maybe I could, deselect this. Let's deselect that. Okay, let me select these guys here. Let's try again with the edge and select a couple from here and see if I can't move them down. See what kind of effect that has. T for move. No, I don't want to move it just yet. I need to select loop. There we go. So let's go ahead and T for move. And let's go ahead and move it down. That's more like it. I want that to be moved down like so. So we'll do that. Now let's select these guys. Let's see if I can't move those up. T for move. That works okay for me, like so. There we go. So now it's working okay. But then what I'm going to do is, how are we doing on time? We're just about run out of time. So I'm going to make 2 more cuts, and we'll come back, and then I'm going to show you how to, on Wednesday, add the handle. And then we'll start watching the, and do a few other things to it. And then we'll start watching the tutorials on character modeling using organic modeling. Okay, so that's it for today. Are there any questions from any of you? Let me go ahead and take roll. Jonathan's here. Juan Fernandez, Cassandra. is here in my link. Okie doke. Okay, so that's it today. I will go ahead and I will make, I'm going to remake this in a little bit more refined version of it and add my cuts, and then I will show you how to go ahead and build the handle using organic modeling techniques. Okay, so that's it for today, and I will see everybody Wednesday. Okay, okie doke, bye-bye.